What about monochrome cameras then? Monochrome-only cameras. This is just one of the hot topics we'll be talking about in today's cracking episode. We'll also look at comfort zones and whether you should stay in yours or get right out of it. We'll explore questions about street photography competitions and a great one about whether expensive cameras really make any difference. And there are lots of juicy tidbits in today's news section. And stick around to the end because I've got a really great recipe for you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a very spring-like episode of the Street Photography Podcast. I've just got back from Venice again, where we've had some glorious weather and actually some perfect shooting conditions. So this is now episode 6 of the show, and I'll tell you what, I'm really enjoying putting these episodes together. Conventional wisdom says that statistically, the majority of new podcasts don't make it beyond episode 7. But thanks to your support, we're going to smash that statistic out of the park. My download figures are just going through the roof. And I've now worked out how to record interviews remotely, so there'll be lots of those to come in future episodes, starting next time in episode 7 in a couple of weeks, but more about that later. Let's talk about comfort zones. Lots of people talk about your comfort zone in street photography, but do you really have to get out of it? Everyone's saying you should get out of your comfort zone to be good. And well, here's a question for you. Is street photography not stressful enough to start with? Well, my first thought that it's certainly stressful when you're trying to do it when you have your wife with you. But seriously, I think if it's seriously stressful, then you're doing it wrong. Someone raised this issue in a comment on one of my YouTube videos recently, and I thought it was an interesting question, and it made me think. We're always being told that being in our comfort zone is too safe, and if we're there, we will rarely shoot anything interesting, or that being out of our comfort zone is where the magic happens. This is unquestionably an issue that affects every street photographer, to some degree, and I'm sure it's an issue you've grappled with at some point. Now, for some people, stepping out of your comfort zone comes really naturally, but for others, it's just a step too far. In fact, I meet many people on workshops who are terrified about getting out of their comfort zone and dread the very thought of it. And these people inevitably look to me for advice. And that advice is always the same. You must do what works for you. This is very much a personality-led thing, and comfort zones will always start and end in different places, depending on the psychological makeup of the photographer. But I think there's another issue in that we really overthink this. We watch a YouTube video with some bloke telling us to get out of our comfort zone or else we'll take terrible pictures. And we buy into this philosophy. We think that if we don't stress ourselves, then we fail as street photographers. But actually, the fact is that no one needs to get out of their comfort zone in order to take a good picture. And what I'm saying here is, what works for me may not work for you. We're all very different in how we connect with the world. And there's no one-size-fits-all approach. But let's say you're the type of person who prefers to work within your limits. Is it possible to change? Should you move towards the edges of your comfort zone? Well, yes, it is possible to change with practice. If that's what you want to do, then you should go for it. And I think the more you expose yourself to a more challenging approach, the more that new approach will eventually become normal. So yes, it's certainly possible to get there with a bit of determination and persistence and practice, I guess. But is all this really necessary? We keep getting told that it is, but in my opinion, no, it's not. And okay, if we're doing a workshop together, then I'll nudge you towards pushing yourself a little bit further, but always aiming to work within yourself and being true to yourself. I found over the years that it's too easy to push people too far, and this will possibly put people off street photography for life. And talking from personal experience, I've always quite liked working within my comfort zone, and I don't think it's done my work or my career any harm. And sure, I'll push the boundaries where necessary, but this would never be the norm. I don't feel I have anything to prove, either to myself or to other people. And I think this whole thing about getting out of your comfort zone is becoming a bit of a sort of macho badge of honour. And I think life's just too short for all this stuff. I guess I just find that I prefer shooting in a more relaxing and less stressful way. So my final word on this is that I really do think you need to be true to yourself. And if playing it a bit safe is what makes street photography palatable and more enjoyable for you, then that's what you should do. That little jingle means that it's question time, and let's hear, first of all, from Robin. Off you go, Robin.
Hi Brian, Robin here from Formby, just out walking the dogs, and a question popped into my head. What do you think about competitions? I've entered a few, not really got anywhere, so I hope it's not sour grapes, but I'm just wondering what the point is and whether you'd recommend going for competitions. They all seem to cost quite a lot of money, and whether it's worth that if it's just for yourself or for exposure. All right, thanks then. Bye.
Well, my first thought is don't get me started. However, I think we need to look at questions from two angles. Firstly, the major national or international street photography competitions. And secondly, your average camera club competition. The big competitions are now quite widespread and they attract a lot of entries, a lot of attention. And call me cynical, but this means that they attract a lot of entry fees for the organisers. And I think this is a key point. I was looking recently at one of the major global street photography competitions, mentioning no names, and I thought that too many of the winning images or shortlisted images were contrived. Others were pandering to transient trends. Some were nothing more than portraits, and some were clearly set up. So I'm just not too sure about how effective these things are. Then you look at the judging panels for some of these competitions, some, not all. Many of the judges are people you've never heard of, which always begs the question, in what way are they qualified to judge a street photography competition? And then we have camera club competitions, which is a very different ball game. And this is where the whole thing falls apart even more. What tends to happen is that occasionally some really great images do get submitted, but these often get knocked back because the judges are largely clueless about what good street photography actually is. Then you get a black and white picture of a homeless person with the clarity dialed up to the max, and you have a winner on your hands. And the problem is with the judges who, on the whole, have very little idea about street photography. There are some exceptions, of course, but I do find this to be a problem with street photography in most, certainly not all, but most camera clubs. And this just breeds a culture of mediocrity at club level, where street photography tends to stagnate. I think judges in general at this level have a fairly narrow world view of street photography, and good, interesting, creative work usually gets sidelined, often in favour of stuff that is either very obvious or very cliched. Again, of course, there are some very notable exceptions. So there you are, Robin. You're probably sensing that I have a fairly dim view of competitions. Again, it's my personal view. I do think there are exceptions, but I think competitions generally are not the best use of your time or money. And in any case, the prizes are often vanity prizes and they don't amount to much very tangible. And the next question is from Martin. Go for it, Martin.
Hello, Brian. Martin here from Suffolk. I appreciate talking about gear isn't something you discuss much, which is refreshing since there are so many aspects about creating a good image, such as composition, storytelling, etc. It seems right that isn't a priority. Having said that, if with all other things being equal, e.g. focal length, exposure settings, etc., you and I captured the same image, the only difference being I'm using a Fuji X100 and you're using, say, a Leica, how would our out-the-camera images differ? Thanks.
Well, what another interesting question. I think that Modern cameras are really good, and we definitely don't need to spend a lot of money on one to be a good street photographer. You probably know that already, that's my point of view. But let's strip the question back a little. We're talking about street photography here, which you and I know is not about perfection. Unlike, say, studio portraits or pictures of birds on sticks or landscapes, perhaps. All the early street photography was, as you know, shot on film. And hey, what's a film camera? It's just a box that lets in light when you press a button. And it's the same with digital cameras, which all have sensors. And I know that sensors differ widely, and I guess the key element is sensor size. So a bigger sensor will usually provide more detail, more depth, more dynamic range, and so on. But a bit like today's car platforms, the same sensors are often used across different camera brands, which kind of anonymizes their effect. A bit like my point about the film camera being no more than a simple light-proof box. They're basically all the same. So this now brings it down to lenses. This is what makes the difference. And I do feel that all other things being equal, if the lens you use is good and better than anything else, that is what is going to make the difference. Now, people often say they can detect a Leica look, which I used to think was a bit of a myth, and it was used by people to justify buying expensive cameras. But I'm not sure that I agree with this, actually, having used Leica for quite a long time. There definitely is a Leica look, and that look comes in no small way from the lenses. There is definitely something quite lovely about the way Leica glass renders images, to my eye at least. And it's actually quite hard to put that into words, but some of you will know what I'm talking about here. Even with the cheaper M-mount lenses like the Voigtlanders. So I've been using the wonderful 40mm f1.4, and I've actually just sold that, and my mate Stan is the lucky owner of that new lens. There's some real character there. And these lenses just don't feel as sterile or as perfect as most modern lenses designed for digital cameras. But going back to the original point, Martin, I think the answer has to be no. I often can't distinguish between images shot on either cheap or expensive cameras, but that's because I'm not looking for those differences. I'm much more interested in how I connect with an image, how it makes me feel, what it says to me, rather than pixel peeping. And I bet if you look at if you and I took the same image, you with your Fuji and me with my Leica, using the same focal length, the same settings, it would be really hard to distinguish between the two in a blind tasting, as it were, to use a wine analogy. In today's gear slot, we're going to talk about monochrome-only cameras. Should you buy one? Are they worth the money? Will they make your monochrome work any better? These are the questions I know a lot of people are asking themselves, and they're really struggling to find the right answer. Leica started this whole thing off back in, I think it was 2012, with its first Type 230, I think. I can't believe it's about 14 years ago now when all this started. And the Type 230 was followed up with the much improved 262, which people are still using now extensively. Fast forward to today, we have a monochrome-only Pentax camera. I think it's a full-frame K3. Then there's a newly announced Ricoh GR4 monochrome. And of course, from Leica, there's the M11, the Q3 monochrome. We hear almost daily pleas from people to Fujifilm to make a mono sensor camera. And I really hope they do, as I think this would be an absolute sellout product. But I'm not sure that they will, because it's all about development costs and how long it takes to recoup the R&D money. Maybe it's just a step too far for a company like Fujifilm, but I think it would be a good thing, but we'll see. But whichever way you go, it's a big investment. And by their very nature, these cameras have severe limitations. So why would you go down this route? Why would you want to limit yourself in this way? Well, as I see it, you do this for one of two reasons. Firstly, some street photographers are completely committed to black and white, and colour just doesn't interest them at all. So for them, it's probably a good investment. All the light gathering and the processing power is concentrated on shades of grey. So there are no colour pixels taking up valuable information space. So from that point of view alone, I think it's fair to say the image is going to be better. But also from the point of view of the black and white only shooter, if you are committed to black and white, why would you wouldn't need colour. You know, it would be like a black and white film photographer buying colour film. You just wouldn't do it, would you? So I think for those photographers, it makes complete sense. So the second way I think these cameras are worth investing in is if you shoot a lot of black and white in low light. And this is where ISO performance can be significantly better. So if you shoot a lot of black and white at night, this could really work for you. I've used the Leica Q2 and the Q2 monochrome side by side under normal lighting conditions, and I can honestly say I couldn't detect much difference between the two, you know, once I converted the colour one to black and white. But you use those two cameras side by side at night, and the difference is absolutely astounding. You know, you could use the Q2 monochrome at night easily at 6,400 ISO and not notice much noise. You could even go up to 12,800 and not notice much noise. It really is astounding. But I think that for most of us, imagine we're out shooting, maybe even with a black and white project on the table, and we see a shot that would really only work in colour. Unless you have another camera with you, you're stumped. And that, for me, is the issue with these cameras. I know it's very tempting to dash out and invest in a really specialised bit of kit, but it's not a decision I'd be in a hurry to make. Unless, of course, money was no object. Well, it's, I think, shall we talk about books for a while? It's difficult to do a book review, isn't it, on a podcast? But sometimes I just feel the need to tell you about something. The book that I've had in my hand all week is what you call a best of street photography book. Now, I'm generally not a fan of best of type street photography books, but one I really value and always enjoy looking at is Magnum Streetwise. And I'm very grateful to my pal Michael for reminding me about this a few days ago. This is published by Thames and Hudson, and I think it costs about 25 quid. And I've got to say, it's 25 quid very well spent. Wherever you are on your street photography journey, I do think this is a book everyone should have. It's essentially a collection of street photography images from Magnum photographers containing, I think it's around 300 images from over 60 of Magnum's illuminaries. So we have names like Martin Parr, Konstantin Manos, Trent Park, Leonard Freed, Bruce Gilden, Alex Webb, Bruce Davidson, Harry Groyart, Elliot Erwitt, David Hearn, Chris Steele Perkins, and loads more. So each of these people, as I say, 60 of them, produce a sort of portfolio of pictures, and there's some narrative to go alongside each set of images. And it's just wonderful. Colour and black and white. There are 383 pages. And I guarantee this is a book that you will keep coming back to, as I do. Now, I'm sure it's available in most of the bigger bookshops, but I'll pop an Amazon link below for you in case you struggle to get hold of a copy. Now, you know what that sound means. As usual on these shows, I'm going to have a little rant. I have in my hand, as usual, hang on, just let me get it. I haven't got it in my hand. I have in my hand my hand grenade. It's a live hand grenade. The pin is intact. You know, I'm tempted to pull it out sometimes, but the pin is intact. And here, you can hear the pin jangling around. And I'm going to metaphorically lob my hand grenade into an issue that irks me. And today, I'm going to lob it at definitions of street photography. Now, you've probably got your head in your hands. There are two schools of thought here. The accepted wisdom being that we need a definition, then a more provocative viewpoint, which suggests that definitions are completely unnecessary. Well, of course we need a definition. In its simplest sense, we really do need to define street photography in a way that separates the good from the boring. Look, I'm not attempting to be a gatekeeper of the term, and I don't want to narrowly define street photography, but we do need a descriptive framework. Because without one, we have a situation where anything goes, the whole genre loses its identity, and anything and everything which is shot on a street will be considered to be street photography. Just look at all these YouTubers with their long lenses shooting reflections in puddles, cats on walls, Big Ben, or look at the street photography Facebook groups, most of which seem to contain, about 25% of what they have is what you and I would call street photography. And I think once we start to call all this mush street photography, then we're in danger. The edge, the spark, the serendipitous excitement of the moment, it all disappears to make way for quantity over quality, otherwise known as content. Oh, don't get me started on content. That's for another rant. So definitions tap into a shared language. Whenever somebody mentions street photography, we conjure up names like Joel Meyerowitz or Cartier-Bresson or Gary Winogrand. And that's because we broadly agree on what the term refers to, which is generally candid moments of everyday life shot in a public place. Now, if we didn't have these spontaneous, reactive thoughts when we think of street photography, then it just becomes a lot harder to discuss it, to teach it, to create it, to critique it, or to curate it. So what should a definition be? Well, I'm going to leave you to think about that. It's not for today, but it's a topic that we will revisit on another day. I need to think about that a little more. Let's go to some news, and we will start off with a bit of exhibition news. Martin Parr is at the Photographers Gallery in London until the 19th of April. So you've got about 3 weeks to get there. And this is great. It's his early black and white work, and it offers a glimpse into rural Irish communities in the 1980s. And I think this body of work is called A Fair Day. And in fact, it was Martin's first major project in black and white, created over a 2-year period. It's in the bookshop downstairs at the Photographers Gallery, so it's absolutely free. It's not a big exhibition, but it is well worth looking at. And the great bonus is you probably get tempted to buy a book while you're there. A week or so ago saw the annual UK Photography Show, which this year was back to its normal base at the NEC in Birmingham. Did you go? We took a decision not to have our usual stand there this year, having had one for the past 7 or 8 years. And, well, from what I hear, I'm very glad we didn't go. People have reported back to me saying that the exhibition was a lot quieter, with numbers down, far fewer exhibitors, and generally less of a buzz, other than dozens of YouTubers walking around talking into their little cameras. I was due to be there to do a book signing, and I feel terrible about this, but I had to pull out because I had a flight to Italy. And, sometimes when you got to go, you got to go. But did you go? If so, what did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. A photographer you may not have heard of, and one who I really rate, is the Italian photographer Luigi Ghiri. That's Ghirri. And he's currently got an exhibition in London based on his Felicità body of work. There's some truly beautiful photography here. Some of it's never been published or exhibited before, but this small exhibition is well worth a visit. It's not necessarily street photography, but it's superb photography. I think there is some stuff there that you could call street photography. Anyway, it's at the Thomas Dane Gallery, that's Dane, and that's in Duke Street in Mayfair, just down the road from the Leica shop, as it happens. So, it could be quite an expensive visit, couldn't it? It could be an expensive day out, depending on how you look at it. Anyway, the exhibition is on till May the 9th. So a bit of workshop news from me. Workshops are really filling up this year, and everything that you see advertised on my website, which, as you know, is streetsnappers.com, there is some availability for the rest of this year, but it is filling up, and I'm not planning to put any more workshops on this year. So if you do want to do something during 2026, you need to get it booked now, or else you might be disappointed. Still on my news about me, I'm selling my Leica Q3 43. I've had this camera for a while. I bought it new, got it from the Leica shop in London, and I think I've done my time with it. I think if I'm being true to myself, the 43mm lens doesn't particularly suit me. I know it suits a lot of people. Anyway, I'm selling my camera, which is almost mint. There are some extras coming with it, and it'll be a good deal for somebody. So ping me an email if you're interested. I'd almost sell it. Almost. I'm also selling my M2, which is a lovely, not far from mint actually, beautiful old M2. Again, if you're interested, ping me some details. More London stuff, and I'm sorry there's a lot of London stuff here, but it's just where things seem to be happening this month. Joel Meyerowitz is giving a talk at Somerset House in London on the 21st of April in the evening, and this will surely be worth a look. I will pop the link in the show notes below. It's part of the Sony World Photography Awards programme, or some such thing. On the publications front, the latest edition of Click magazine is just out, with its usual feast of interesting words and images from the world of documentary and street photography. Now, if you don't know Click, this is, it's Click with a K, by the way. This is a bi-monthly publication, or is it quarterly? Could be quarterly. Anyway, it's just celebrated its second anniversary, so it's been going for 2 years, and it's very good. I'll pop a link in the show notes for you. And before I forget to mention it, a quick trailer for episode 7. I'm doing quite a long interview with a chap called Derek Dark, who is the founder and editor of Click magazine. And Derek will give us some insights into what the magazine's all about and how you can get yourself featured in there. You may have noticed that the street photography community Facebook group is taking a breather. It's called the Street Snappers Community Group. Okay, it's a Facebook group. And I do mean the community, not the Street Snappers Collective group. That's a completely different thing. But the community group is taking a breather. We've decided to pause the group for a few days while we have a bit of a reset. Now, I think this group is widely thought to be one of the better street photography groups on Facebook, in that it's basically a critique group. And the standard of that critique is pretty high. And it's not the sort of group where people shout at each other and put each other down. It's very constructive, and it's very carefully moderated, and we don't tolerate any idiots in there. Anyway, we've decided to take a close look at the group's purpose and its ethos, and it's one of those groups that has a hardcore of active members who regularly post images or regularly provide critique, but they make up only a minuscule proportion of the 8,500 members. Now, I never understand why people join a group like this and never get involved. They join, then you never hear from them. Why bother? Anyway, all I'm saying here is, if you're a member of this group, stand by for some interesting announcements, hopefully coming later this week. So there's a bit of music to get you in the mood for what's to come. I promised you a recipe at the beginning of the show, and if you thought I was going to give you the perfect recipe for a Portra 400 preset or something like that, then you're going to be pleasantly surprised, because I'm not. No, none of that nonsense. You don't really expect me to talk about presets, do you? Having just got back from another Venice trip, which inevitably involved drinking quite a few Negronis, I'm going to give you the perfect recipe for the classic Negroni cocktail, almost the national drink in Venice. And everyone who comes on my Venice workshops is encouraged to try at least one of these beauties during their stay. And I'll tell you what, a lot of people get quite hooked on them, in a good way. Right, here goes. Start with a chunky tumbler, none of your highball nonsense, just a nice, chunky, heavy glass tumbler. Some ice, three cubes of ice is just about ideal. There are 3 ingredients and they come in thirds. So start off with a third red vermouth, or vermouth as some people call it, but it's not, it's vermouth. So pour that in, And then you get your bottle of gin and you pour a third of gin. Oh, this is looking good. And then your final ingredient is, and this is the key one, is Campari. So a third Campari. So it's a third gin, a third vermouth, a third Campari. Give it a good slurp around, a good, not a shake, what is it? Give it a good stir, that's the word I was looking for. Stirred, not shaken. A good stir, and then drop in a nice slice of orange, fresh orange, and there you have it, the perfect Negroni. So I'm going to say cheers. Oh, that's pretty good. Well, that's about it for another week, folks. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope you'll join me next time, which should be in about 2 weeks. I'm getting into quite a nice fortnightly cycle with these things, and next time I'll be bringing you the first in a series of longer interviews, along with all the usual stuff, your questions, news, a little bit about gear maybe, a book review, all the stuff you've come to expect. But in the meantime, I'm always in need of questions. So if you have a question for the show, you can do it in one of two ways. I'd prefer a spoken question. So just get your phone out, record your question. All you need to say is your first name, where you're from, then the question. And then if you want me to include it, add your Instagram handle. If you don't fancy doing that, just email me the question and I can read it out. But that's not quite as personal, is it? But it's up to you. I'd love to have your questions, whatever they are, and they will get used at some point. I have a list of them and I'm taking them democratically in order. So that's it from me. Bye for now, and cheers. Can't believe it. Half that Negroni's gone already. I'm going to be falling down the stairs.